Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Delighted to be here with you on a Friday afternoon. We've got a great show for you. Dr. Jared Stout, second hour. And we're going to talk with him about getting Mary into your life. We defend Mary often on this program. That is, her place in the plan of salvation, her queenship, her perpetual virginity, her ascension, all these things, all these dogmas and doctrines about Mary. But a little bit of practical help for getting Mary into your life. I know there are people who will ask, why would I want to get Mary into my life? Well, you can call and ask Dr. Stout that among the other questions that he will get in the second hour of the program today. First hour, Trent Horn, one of the top apologists in the world, has a new book. He's the author of Why We're Catholic, the most popular book ever published by Catholic Answers Press by a long shot. And now he's got a new book out called Confusion in the Kingdom, How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church. Trent Horn, welcome.
Cy Kellett, thank you for having me.
Congratulations on the book.
Yes, I'm very excited about this one. I think the cover art is really interesting. I actually asked, I'm pretty sure that this was created by a human, possibly with AI assistance, but a lot of people ask me if it's an AI cover, and I asked. I don't think it's totally AI.
It's funny because there's people in this office who I have heard, and they'll look at a piece of art online or at a book cover or something, they'll go, AI. And I can't tell. I don't know how it is. But this I believe is the product of Shane. Is this a Shane book cover? Does anybody know? I think Shane, our graphic designer, made it. Confusion in the Kingdom. Jesus right in the middle of it. So I suppose
everybody wants a piece of him. Everybody wants to tear apart his cloak,
Yeah. Well, but what is progressive Catholicism?
Sure. So it's one of those things where it can be hard to define, but you know it when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
And a typical pattern I see among progressive or self-identified liberal Catholics or left Caths, and here I need to make a distinction. Well, if you think about a theological spectrum, which sometimes overlaps with the political spectrum, but doesn't always, on the far left side of the church, you might have, for example, open dissenters, people who will say we ought to have women priests. There ought to be same-sex marriages in the Catholic Church. Abortion is not sinful. Contraception is not sinful. So people on the Catholics for Choice, for example, would be an example of this. On the far left, openly dissenting. One rung before that, before you get there, you have individuals who will claim to be faithful to the teaching of the magisterium and say, well, of course, I assent to the teaching on sexuality, on life. But then they'll do things that are confusing. These are well-known lay individuals, writers at the National Catholic Reporter, theologians, contributors to American Magazine, priests. In my book, I cover people like Father James Martin, Father Dan Horan, individuals who then create confusion to say, well, yes, I assent to the teaching on homosexuality, but should we really fire a teacher who's in a same-sex marriage, who's at a Catholic high school? They seem to not be as concerned about scandal related to issues related to sexual ethics or, let's say, platforming someone whose views on social justice they admire, but who also happens to defend legal abortion. Whereas if someone were to platform a self-identified Catholic who happened to be racist, they would be completely opposed to that. So my concern among liberal and progressive Catholics is taking what is obligatory, such as the Church's teachings on chastity and sexual ethics, merely making them permissible, and then follow them if you want, but you don't really have to follow them, or make it seem like they're not as important or not as grave to violate. Then the other side would be taking what is permissible, like a certain liberal political view on a contemporary issue, like climate change or gun control or immigration, and say that that permissible view is the obligatory view all Catholics must hold. Catholics have to support every initiative to combat climate change. They have to support any organization that claims to be anti-racist, even if the organization espouses anti-Catholic views. They have to consider deportation intrinsically evil, and on and on and on it goes. So the goal of the book is to clear up the confusion that many of these voices have raised over the years.
The book is available now. It's called Confusion in the Kingdom. What you're describing sounds to me like something where you have an ideology and you use Christianity to promote the ideology rather than having Christianity and adjusting your ideologies to fit the demands of Christianity.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest problems when I engage those who would identify as being a liberal Catholic or a progressive Catholic, is that I think they tend to look at issues purely through a modern secular political liberal lens. There's nothing wrong with using sound reasoning to identify particular moral and ethical issues. But a lot of times I see that those political commitments, excuse me, tend to be what drives the discussion rather than looking at it from the view of the magisterium and seeing, for example, the nuances the magisterium might bring to the question. So recently, for example, seeing among these liberal Catholics raising quite a stink on the issue of transgender ideology. Father Dan Horan openly defends the idea, an anthropology that says a person can be a woman simply because they identify as a woman, for example. And he was, at least the time I was writing, was affiliated with an all-Catholic female college that actually got in the news for allowing so-called transgender women to be admitted, and then reversed its policy, which he objected to. So looking at it from, being committed to that, so when Pope Francis talks about gender colonization as being one of the most dangerous ideas today, or the new document from the DDF on human dignity refers to the assault on dignity that comes from so-called, gender reassignment surgery, they just bend over backwards to not want to accept just what the church has continually taught, but also currently teaches on these matters, or they want to continue to nuance it or water it down as much as possible, hoping that they can get a shift in the teaching at some point.
If you'd like to talk with Trent, 888-318-7884 is the number. We're talking about his new book, Confusion in the Kingdom, How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church. There's no there's no one who has a monopoly on using the church to cover an ideology.
Absolutely. I was going to say, Cy, one of the objections that people raise to this book, it's a stock objection, is, what about the people on the right who are causing the reactionaries on the right? Or people will say, what about traditionalists or radical traditionalists, right, who cause confusion and scandal in the church? And I would say, yes, just as there are people on the far left who reject church teaching, there are people on the far right who openly reject it, like a Sedevacantist, for example, who denies that the See of Peter has been held by a valid pope for 70 years now. So that would also be a case of going off the edge. You can go off the cliff on the left or the right, and before you go off the cliff, there are people who will, on the right, I find more on the left, the error comes from trying to make the forbidden permissible. So trying to make the forbidden moral actions, to try to make them permissible. On the far right, or not far right, on the right, I see more a confusion that aligns from trying to make what is permissible obligatory, like that you have to reject the theory of evolution if you're a faithful Catholic, or you cannot use natural family planning if you are a faithful Catholic, that it's no different than contraception. So I am planning, Cy, to write a book in the next few years on I call a very specific term, the counterpart to confusing liberals or progressives, and that would be Catholic fundamentalists. Okay. So I don't want to, for example, I'm not going to say radical traditionalists, because there's nothing wrong with embracing tradition. Tradition is a good thing, as long as you recognize to allow the freedom of others who may not want to choose a tradition that is permissible at this point, that's not obligatory, like a certain liturgy to attend, or something like that. So I contrast that. There's nothing wrong with caring about the traditions of the church. The error there is what I call Catholic fundamentalism, of and I was going to focus on that and what it obliges people to. So I do hear that. I actually thought about, for this book, I thought about covering both in one book, but it just wasn't feasible. So this is almost like a part one. And then in a few years, I will address that as a part two. But that doesn't take away from the truth of what I have right now.
Yeah, in Confusion in the Kingdom. I actually wondered if maybe part of your thinking on this is that, if you're a progressive Catholic in the sense of this idea of kind of accepting the sexual revolution and even kind of saying, well, the sexual revolution and I don't know, some scientific research, social science or whatever it changes what the church should be teaching about sexuality or that you have the entirety of pop culture, television news, the universities are on that side. So it does seem to me that that's more dangerous in the sense that it's a way of accommodating to the culture in the way that the right wing, what you might call a fundamentalist, is actually trying to be countercultural. We may and should argue with that and defend the what's true in the church, but it does seem to me like the kid who encounters many of these kind of I don't know, accommodated teachers at their Catholic university or Catholics, on Twitter, or what's that group, Catholics for Choice or whatever.
Right.
All they're getting is support to just go with the culture.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of what Paul says in Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed in the pattern of thinking of this world, but rather be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Do not be conformed to the thinking of this world. Paul also says that Satan is the god of this world. So it's one thing to be able to want to present authentic Catholic teaching in a way the modern world understands, but it's quite another to look at, for example, the church's teaching on sexuality and almost be embarrassed or ashamed of it. And I find that the strategy seems to be among not the complete dissenters, but ones more on the left or progressives, is all we have to do to reach out to those who identify as LGBT, for example, is just practice, kindness and charity. Or on the left side, frankly, they don't like apologetics at all. I have a whole chapter in the book on the disdain progressive Catholics have for apologetics, because I really do think that, and I don't cover this in the book, but I hopefully in a future work will, many of them think that the only people who are in danger of being damned are those hard-hearted fundamentalists, basically.
Yeah.
So their concern is more about promoting social justice in this life rather than evangelism. We're thinking, well, as long as we were very kind and charitable, that would be enough to convince people. Now, I agree that is a necessary condition to be kind and charitable, but it's not a sufficient condition. In some cases, a person may be overwhelmed by receiving the love of Christ from us through charitable actions. That's a great thing. But in many other cases, a person may say, I appreciate you being kind to me. And I cover the story in the book about a LGBT activist who was reading an article from a progressive Catholic saying, you know what, we should just go and give out water bottles at pride parades and say, we love you. And this LGBT activist said, I hate this stuff. At least the fundamentalists are honest and say that we're sinners and we need to change. I can appreciate that. But you don't just say love. You say that what I'm doing is a sin. Just tell me that because I think you're wrong. Okay, let's have a conversation about that. I feel like they shy away from where the culture butt heads with us because some people butt heads aggressively here. But we can engage the culture assertively, but also charitably.
888-318-7884, the number. Our guest is Trent Horn. The Council of Trent is Trent's very popular YouTube site and podcast. Check it out on YouTube. Just look for Council of Trent or go to counciloftrent.com to find out what Trent is up to. We'll be right back. Discuss the book, Confusion in the Kingdom, and take some calls for Trent right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. Please join me for Ascension's Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. We're going through the entire Bible and the Catechism in 365 days. If you've ever wanted to understand what it means to be Catholic and allow those truths to shape your life, this is for you.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Our guest is Trent Horn, and he's got a new book out. It's called Confusion in the Kingdom: How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church. I feel like, actually, Trent, this has been going on my whole life, and as you know, I'm very, very, very old, but maybe you know about Father Drinan, the Jesuit in Massachusetts, who kind of like...
Father Robert Drinan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is back in the 70s, kind of creating a way for certain left-leaning Catholic politicians to get away with being pro-choice, because he kind of developed this idea that people took, which was, well, I'm personally opposed, but I would never impose my beliefs on someone else.
He ended up being a congressman and was one of the reasons why Pope St. John Paul II said in the revised code of canon law that clerics cannot hold elected office.
Yeah,
because you get scandal like this.
But I guess my point is, that's 50 years ago. This kind of thing has been going on a long time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So when it comes to the issue of abortion, among those who are progressive Catholics, they might say, well, yes, obviously abortion is a sin. But maybe we shouldn't try to make abortion illegal, right? Maybe we should just focus on the root of the problem, and it's just an economic problem. If we just focused on their proposed, usually Democratic, political programs, that would reduce abortions, and that's all that we should do. Which, of course, commits an either-or fallacy, because someone could say, oh, well, you could have social programs and also work to legally protect unborn children. It's not an either-or mentality. Why does it have to be? And number two is, as I show in the book, I mean, we have an obligation to secure the right to life of all human beings, to make sure all human beings in a society are treated justly. A society can't just mistreat human beings because it's the popular fashion of the day. And also, I point out in the book that those who say, well, it's just an economic problem, that's actually not true, because if you go to other countries in Europe, for example, I believe Sweden has an abortion rate that is similar to the United States, and they have copious entitlement programs and social welfare and benefit programs for their citizens. The fact is that when you look at studies of women at different economic levels, a woman who makes $50,000 a year is 4 times more likely to choose abortion than someone who makes less money, like $20,000 a year, which is counterintuitive, right? And many people, the majority of people who choose abortion, though, would probably come from, would come from a lower socioeconomic class, just like numbers-wise, right? Not everybody's up in the upper class. But also, those people also tend to have more children, whereas those in the upper echelons of society, they tend to be, when contraception fails, for example, for them, they are much, much more likely to choose abortion, even though they have the means to care for a child. So it's interesting.
888-318-7884 is the number, 888-318-7884. There's no question that if you're going to defend the teachings of the Catholic Church, people on the right wing and people on the left wing are going to be mad at you. There's just no question about that. But there is a kind of accommodationist thing going on the left wing, where we have, like, we don't have a major problem of Catholic schools being too right-wing, but we do have a problem of Catholic schools flying the pride flag out in front of the Catholic school.
And you have people who will argue, people like Father James Martin, who will say, well, what's wrong with that? The flag just means, to them, it just means this is a welcoming place for anyone, regardless of their sexual orientation. All people are made in the dignity, and all people have dignity, and all people are made in the image and likeness of God. So what's wrong with that? And as I show in my book, Father Martin would not tolerate that argument used for another controversial symbol. So if I were to say to him, yes, but this pride flag is also its primary meaning. The primary meaning of the pride flag by most people who fly it is that sexual behaviors between people of the two sex are morally good. They are something to celebrate. The behavior itself is a good thing we ought to celebrate. That's what the flag means. It's just what it means. Just because you could find a few liberal Catholics who say that's not what it means to me, doesn't change that's what it means to other people. So I would ask Father Martin, hey, Father Martin, would you mind if a Catholic high school flew the Confederate battle flag? Because this school in Alabama, what it means to them is Southern culture is really special and we value it. I'm sure he would say it doesn't matter because the fact that some people, or even if it's a minority, so even if it's a minority of people use the Confederate battle flag as a racist symbol, that means no Catholic can ever use it because it's been tainted by them. And yet they won't apply the same standard to things like the pride flag and its other iterations and variations. So my goal, once again, in the book is to show that they create confusion in treating some sins, like the sin of wage theft or the sin of racism, with the vigor it deserves, though sometimes they muddy the waters and misidentifying what those sins even are. But they don't have the same zeal towards culturally accepted sins like sodomy, legal abortion, other, transgender, promoting mutilative surgeries, for example, on young people, things like that.
888-318-7884 is the number. I'm going to go to the phones, but just to let you know, you can save 25% right now on Confusion in the Kingdom, Trent Horn's new book, when you use the promo code SANITY during checkout at shop.catholic.com. Use the promo code SANITY and save 25%. Let's go to Tony in Boston, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Tony. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hey, gentlemen. Trent Horn, big fan. Thank you for your work. I was looking at a distributist group in a city I'll be moving to, and I was horrified to see that it was basically just a front for socialism, with it was labeled as a Catholic worker movement, but it was just atrociously left-wing. Do you talk at all about how it affects what should be really explicitly political movements, or is it mostly retained to bioethics and sexual ethics in your book?
Sure. So part one of the book is called Sex and Life Issues, and it focuses on issues related to the watering down of the teachings on sexuality and human life. Part two of the book deals with faith and justice. So that deals more with elements of our faith, like confusing Christologies, God the Mother, feminist theology, confusing takes on the Eucharist as if it's not actually Jesus present, or we shouldn't treat it in that way. I also talk about social issues where liberal Catholics demand Catholics adhere to modern secular liberal positions on these issues when they're not obliged to. So I cover racism, liberation theology, deportation, gun violence, and the last chapters on climate change. However, and I tell you what, stay on the line, and we'll send both books to you, because I'll do what I want. I'll do what I want. I want to send you two books. I want to send you Confusion in the Kingdom, Tony, and I also want to send you my book, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? The answer is no. Here's why. Because in that, I didn't cover economics as much in this book, because I covered that really at length in my previous book, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? And I have an appendix on distributism. Now, my position on distributism, and I and Catherine Pakalik, my co-author, who's a Catholic economist, take this view. Catholics are permitted to be distributists, true distributism. We find a lot of pragmatic and prudential difficulties with it as a modern economic system. But I've done debates before with a distributist. Actually, I did a debate with a distributist and a socialist once, And the distributist started sounding more and more and more like a socialist, because in order to achieve the distributed limits on owning capital and other things like that, you really need a very strong central government and intervention in the economy to do that. And it really starts to turn into socialism very quickly, in my opinion. But so yeah, I don't cover economics as much in Confusion in the Kingdom, Tony, because I covered it in Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? So I'd like to send you both books. I think you'll like that. So
okay, Tony?
Yeah, do you have any follow-ups?
So generous. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
First, thank you very much. I had a follow-up, but it just left my brain, so I will keep you on the line while we wait for processing to happen.
All right, Tony, we have similar brains. Thank you very much for the call. Lots more folks on the lines. We've got to take a quick break. We're talking with Trent Horn, whose podcast and YouTube site are Council of Trent. You can find him at TrentHornPodcast.com, or just go to YouTube and look for Trent Horn and you'll find him. Confusion in the Kingdom is the new book. We'll talk more about it right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Are you scared to talk about abortion? Don't worry, almost everyone is. You can overcome this fear as Trent Horn shows in the newly revised and expanded second edition of Persuasive Pro-Life. With a little knowledge and a few proven techniques, you can become a bold and effective apologist for life. Visit shop.catholic.com to order your copy of Persuasive Pro-Life and never again be afraid to speak up. Also available at good Catholic bookstores.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sibbers. Join me for Beacon of Truth.
On the next Beacon of Truth, the vine and the branches, and looking at Soulful Psalm 139.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live with Cy Kellett.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn's here with us. And he's got a new book out, Confusion in the Kingdom, How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church. You can get it over at shop.catholic.com for 25% off right now if you use the promo code SANITY. Back to the phones, I think we're going, Trent. We got.
Let's do it.
Yeah, there's two lines open, but we've got plenty of callers for the moment. Justin is in Arkansas, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Justin, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi, Trent. Good morning or afternoon. And I was listening to your podcast this morning on Patreon, and I was just kind of wondering your opinion based off this book and your discussion you had this morning about what role the access to information kind of plays into the confusion in the kingdom with instant access, 24-hour news cycle, looking for controversy.
I think what social media and online information tends to do with this is that it creates a kind of tribalism. So what ends up happening is you have the leaders in your tribe you look up to. And algorithms will respect that there's certain sources you want to look at and just keep recommending those. And you'll bury yourself in particular views. So if you're more of a liberal Catholic, you'll have your tribe and you try to understand their views on matters. And eventually you don't even realize it, although people on the right do this as well. They absolutely do it. So on either side, what happens is you have the people you look up to. You have the positions that are kind of the positions of your tribe. You have the people who are the enemies of the tribe that are not to be trusted. And you're always kind of at war with that other opposing ideological group. And, and so everything they do is through a hermeneutic of suspicion, and everything your side does, well, there's an explanation for it if there's a difficulty or a scandal or, something like that. So I have noticed that, and it is very difficult to see. And it's all of us. I mean, I can be guilty of tribalism as well, and psychological biases, cognitive bias, doing things like overlooking evidence that I find inconvenient for my worldview. All of us have to struggle against that. But seeing this where people get reinforced, and especially people where their community are just other people who are very, very outspoken on social media, I think it can lead to them to have that very black and white binary thinking, and just falling into a trap of saying, yeah, that your faith becomes aligned to certain political positions, and just treating with disdain those who don't share that view or disagree with you. And it's something both sides have to work on.
Okay, Justin?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thanks very much. Oh, let's send Justin a copy of Confusion in the Kingdom if he wants it. Hang on.
Of course. Let's do it.
Yeah, hang on, Justin. We'll send it to you. Let's go to Columbus, Ohio, where Will is listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Will, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Trent and Cy. Love your work. Really faithful listener here in Central Ohio. I'm a faithful reader of National Catholic Reporter, America, Commonweal, you name it. I read all of them, and I read on the right as well. So I enjoy your balanced approach. My question that I have is, now I came into the conversation a little late. You were mentioning the priest who was a congressman back in, I believe, the 70s and 80s. Who was scolded by John Paul as a congressman for taking that position.
Father Drinan,
I have a question about. Yes, I have a question. I read this, and I want to know your take on it. There was a meeting in Hyannisport in the late 60s, early 70s that was at the Kennedy compound with various theologians giving their opinions about how they could craft an opinion to support abortion and some other things that are against the church. Do you recall that? And can you give me any idea about who was there or how that was organized or anything?
I do not. I am not familiar with that alleged meeting, so unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to enlighten you on that. I do think, though, that the movement of the Democratic Party to embrace legal abortion and to have really just an absolutist position on abortion, that their goal would be that it should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. Now, they would say, well, we only say just the health of the mother after viability. Okay, what counts as health? Well, it's anything physical, emotional, psychological, familial, or age-related, and this is what they always argue for. And really, a lot of them would even say, yeah, up till the moment of birth, that's mother's choice, maybe even shortly thereafter, and the government should pay for it, and doctors shouldn't be able to refuse it, and pregnancy resource centers shouldn't exist because they deceive, quote-unquote, deceive people. So this absolutist position is not what they've always had. This is something that has developed over time. Really, when you look at the trajectory of it, you go back to the early 1970s after Roe versus Wade, many people who were opposed to legal abortion after Roe were actually political liberals. They were people who were Vietnam War protesters, for example. You had people like Ted Kennedy and Jesse Jackson, who were at one point opposed to legal abortion, at least to a point. They certainly did not have the absolutist position that the Democratic Party holds today. And by the way, this isn't just parties. Although I will say it's not uncommon to find a pro-choice Republican. It's very, very difficult to find a pro-life Democrat. There are a few who are out there, but they really need to be placed in a preserve. They're quite the endangered species. So you see this that really early on in the 70s and early 80s, really in the 70s, I would say, you had Democrats who were pro-life, who were against abortion. But I think after the election of Ronald Reagan and the moral majority, Pat Robertson, in the 1980s, that's where you see the shift in the fault lines because also in the 80s was the time when American Protestants were getting on board with the Right to Life movement. People don't know this, but the National Right to Life Committee was basically started by Catholics. During the 70s, a lot of Protestants said, well, no, abortion's a Catholic issue. The Bible doesn't really say anything about this. You had the Southern Baptist Convention defending abortion in the case of rape, for example. You know, a lot of evangelicals who were not on board, they didn't get in there till the 80s. So the 80s where we see the split. But even there in the 90s, you had Bill Clinton's triangulation, safe, legal, and rare. And then now it's really in the past, like, well, they got permission to go full blast since they lost with Roe being overturned. But in the past, like 5-10 years, you see it a lot more vociferous. So I do think that their position, liberal position on abortion, especially in the Democratic Party, it's not something I would say that was personally opposed, but there were certainly the Cuomos, some of the Kennedys were putting this line out there, but it wasn't a universal line. Though honestly, now I think a lot of Democrats don't even say personally opposed. They don't say that. That was more, that because it's like, well, why are you personally opposed? What's the big deal? I see more. There is a gradual embrace of the abortion absolutist position among the Democrats and Democratic Party in America. So I'm not familiar with there being like a cabal that gave talking points, but the existence of such cabals also wouldn't surprise me. Is that helpful?
Oh, do we still have him with us? Sorry, there was a lot of changes. Was that helpful?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the call. It actually brings us to the break. We got to take a quick break. We'll take more calls for Trent, and there are lines open if you'd like to get in the queue. 888-318-7884. Trent Horn, Catholic Answers Apologist, has a brand new book out. It's called Confusion in the Kingdom: How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church. If you'd like to get in on the conversation, give us that call. 888-318-7884.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Human beings are God's greatest masterpiece. Every person is made in the image and likeness of God. But every saint, that is, every person who accepts God's invitation, his upward call to make them holy. And so every story presents us with a unique masterpiece that God is writing.
The Journey Home, Monday night, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and television.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Trent Horn, Trent of the Council of Trent podcast that you can find at counciloftrent.com or just go on YouTube. The best place is to go on YouTube. You get to see it and hear it. Go to YouTube, look up Trent Horn. You'll find all kinds of great material there. And Confusion in the Kingdom: How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church is Trent's latest book. It really is a beautiful book. I have to say to you, Trent, the first thing I opened up to in the book when I got my copy of it was the section that kind of dealt with transgenderism. And the reason I did was because the Cass report had come out, by the time I got my book, and this was the report came out long after you finished the book, and a lot of people in Europe are taking the Cass report quite seriously. They're saying this is harmful to girls. We have to stop. There are British politicians coming out and saying, "I'm just not doing the pronoun thing anymore. It's destroying." Because an actual scientist went and looked at the science and said, look, this is a massive study of the consequences of this on kids' lives, and you're pretty hard pressed to find anything good coming out of it. Yeah. So I wanted to see what you had to say, because I think this one...
It's a counterfeit religion. It is a religion devoted to autonomy, radical ownership of self, and to just unlimited so-called freedom of actions to define oneself. And this has been going on for a long time. You think about in the Supreme Court, you had Casey versus Planned Parenthood, and one of the defenses of abortion in that case was the famous mystery passage from Justice Kennedy. He's always got these, he always had, I should say, these Fruit Loopy kind of lines in the opinions of the court, saying, for example, freedom includes the ability to define one's life, one's existence, the meaning of the universe. And it's like, no, freedom doesn't mean I get to define whether somebody else is a human being or not. He also was writing in the Obergefell decision that, marriage has to be legally redefined, because what about someone who calls out into the night, into the dark, and doesn't hear an answer and is sentenced to a life of loneliness or something like that, saying that's actually not what marriage is for. Marriage is not for solving the problems of loneliness. There are many people who are unmarried, who are healthy individuals. They are not consigned to loneliness by virtue of being unmarried. They are still human beings with dignity. And there are married people who have dysfunctional marriages who are actually quite lonely. But yeah, but going
he's a
back
Catholic.
to all of that. Yeah.
That's what
Kennedy. That's the thing. That's it's so unfortunate to see. But with the transgender issue, you're right. I go through the book and I engage Catholics who claim that Catholic theology is compatible with gender reassignment, and Father Haran, as I mentioned before, who says that if a bishop doesn't adopt transgender ideology, you should call him Sister so-and-so and see how he feels. And I would say, well, actually, we have objective evidence that his status as a bishop did change with multiple witnesses giving him the sacrament of holy orders. So it's that's certainly, you're actually undermining your own case in saying something like that. But it is very difficult to see, once again, Cy, on the transgender issue. I think many of the liberal Catholics, there are some, and I understand that, who are asking for sensitivity in language and pastoral accompaniment of those who suffer from gender dysphoria. I understand that. But many of them go far beyond that to try to legitimize this anti-Catholic and false anthropology of the human person.
But I'm wondering if people will, if something like that, what was becoming so obvious is if you went with pop culture on transgenderism, people like us said, don't do that. And now the science turns out to support that and say, don't do that. Are people going to wake up a little bit as Catholics and say, maybe my first move morally should not be to try to accommodate myself to pop culture, but at least I should be a little more critical of pop culture?
Yeah, you should be critical. And now it doesn't mean that everything that everything pop culture gives us is wrong. I mean, there are Catholics, during the time of Galileo, who said, look, the church tells us that the sun goes around the earth, and pop culture is now giving us a different perspective. So that is something we can assert and say, well, is the exact order and nature of the universe something that the Bible is asserting to us, or is the Bible asserting and teaching something else? Should we treat the Bible like a science book or not? But that doesn't mean, so when people will say, well, it's basically the same thing, that science gives us new information on homosexuality, so we need to change what the church teaches on that. Well, what new information? Well, it shows that it's an orientation that you can have. It's something that you can be part of your disposition. Although that contradicts gender theorists who would say that your identity and orientation can change at the drop of a hat. So it does contradict that a bit. But even if it were to show that scientific fact doesn't change anything. Science has shown more that that some inclinations to steal are an orientation that arise from kleptomania for some people. It's just a biological orientation they have. But it doesn't follow, therefore, that the seventh commandment no longer applies, because we have this new science that tells the origins of why some people steal. So they really are trying to answer by going to science to answer these moral questions. It's like trying to weigh a chicken with a yardstick. You're using the wrong tool.
Donnie in Texas, listening to EWTN on channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio. You are up next, Donnie. Go ahead with your question for Trent Horn.
Good evening, and I'm going through a area may have a dead zone, may drop off, but so my question is related to the use of methotrexate injection for ectopic pregnancy. From what I've found, there's no official ruling on that about the morality of that agent, and I've seen where some bioethicists approve it, some bioethicists have said that it, but I just wanted to see if you had any more information on that.
All right, methotrexate.
Yes, sure. So methotrexate is a drug, I believe it was previously used as an anti-cancer drug. It stops cellular growth. This is dealing with, now the church would certainly be opposed to using methotrexate for a direct abortion. For elective abortions, for direct abortions. Usually it's a combination of mifepristone and methotrexate are used to induce a miscarriage. However, in the case of ectopic pregnancy, where the child implants in the fallopian tube, you have a pathology. You have scar tissue in the fallopian tube. You have the child growing in the incorrect place, and the child will not survive. They are growing in the wrong place. They're kind of dying. And so if you do nothing, both the mother and child will die, but you can intervene under the principle of double effect. So the classic views that have always been permitted would be to remove a section of the fallopian tube, which is a salpingectomy. So just remove that damaged section of the tube to remove the child. Though the church has currently left it an open question whether one can use two other methods. That would be salpingostomy, where you make an incision in the tube and remove the child. And you're not intending the death of the child, rather you're intending to move the child out of the mother's body to protect the mother from the child's continued growth that will cause the mother to die by severing blood vessels and arteries. So you don't intend the child's death, if you foresee that will happen. And there's a proportionate reason for doing so, because if you do nothing, both of them will die. So it's left open, the question of salpingostomy, making an incision rather than removing the tube, and methotrexate, which would target the trophoblast, the cells that will eventually form the placenta. And some ethicists have argued that it's not a part of the child proper, that it's a way to remove the child from this dangerous position he or she is in, placing the mother in danger. And then the child passes away when they leave the mother's body. So when I say the church has left it as an open question, what that means is it is permissible. You can privately hold the view that you find this to be immoral, but you cannot compel others to believe the same thing. And the church in the future could clarify this issue and say that upon further study and clarification, this is not permitted. That as new technologies develop, the church has to assess the object of the acts involved, the intentions and the circumstances, and whether they're just or unjust. And so so in the case here, it's the same thing that when other technologies have evolved, like when you have, for example, certain reproductive technologies. So you have reproductive technologies where the husband and wife engage in the marital act. Some of his semen can some of his semen be taken from that and then placed in the mother's body to fertilize an egg in her body? It's something people hadn't dealt with before, and currently it's permissible. So when these things happen, in these cases where we haven't had to deal with this before, or we have technology to address it, a lot of times it begins as a permitted opinion, and then the church issues a formal teaching either for or against. The church has done this as well in the case of radical hysterectomies for a uterus that can no longer sustain life and other things like that. If you have more questions on this, I would definitely recommend the National Catholic Bioethics Center.
Thanks.
They're good.
Thanks, Donnie. I'm going to keep moving. A confusion in the kingdom, how progressive Catholicism is bringing harm and scandal to the church. That's the new book from Trent Horn, our guest. I'm going to Greg in Montana, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Greg, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Trent, huge fan of your podcast, and I really kind of found it from your dive into the questions on Mormonism. I thought that was really fascinating. But I know that you're going to be on Plants of Aquinas with talking with Pearl Davis in a few weeks, and I was just wondering, for questions that might not be labeled as progressive, but kind of the opposite, do you approach those questions the same way, saying that rather than marriage being two men or whatever like that, something like marriage elevates women to a position that is higher than some people might think?
You got it, Trent?
Obviously, that's not.
I think I understand it a little. A little bit, that there are errors on the right and the left. I don't even know if I would call Pearl's errors on the right per se, but the people who seem to embrace it tend to have more conservative theological and political views. Pearl really adheres to a camp called the Red Pill camp, which claims that marriage is something that is bad for men. That women are ultimately bad for men because women have somehow gotten worse in society or things like that. And so, marriage is, men should just avoid marriage. But many of the red pillars think that men having sexual relations with women, that's not as a big a deal. But that would certainly go against what the church teaches on like the sin of fornication. So on the right, what I do is I try to show, look, what does the church teach? What does the church teach on this issue? I'll give you an example where the two sides sort of meet like a horseshoe. On the far left, you'll have people who will say contraception and NFP are basically the same thing, so we ought to treat contraception like NFP and say there's nothing wrong with it. On the far right, you'll have some Catholics who will claim contraception and NFP are not different. They're not different in any way, so we ought to treat NFP like contraception and consider it sinful. So I would just say to both groups, a pox on both your houses. You're both wrong because you have failed to make a distinction between purposely intervening in the marital act, doing something that sterilizes the act and tells God, we do not want you here during this marital act, and natural family planning. Because all natural family planning is the marital act where man and woman fully give themselves to one another. It's a combination of two things. They either fully give themselves to one another and are completely open to life, or they do something else. They play badminton, they go to the movies, you do something else. And it's just a combination of those two things. So NFP is the kind of thing that could be abused in degree, as if you got married and you just didn't want children and you practiced, and because you don't want to be stressed, because you just want to take vacations all the time and you just use NFP for your whole marriage. That would be a sin accumulated by degree. Versus something like contraception, which is a sin in every individual act when it is done, because it is an act against that future life, against God. It is an intervention in the marital act to set it against how life affirming that it ought to be, that God made it to be. So I hope that's helpful, and I'm glad you called in, Greg.
Greg, I'll tell you what, I'd like to send you a copy of the book. I'm nervous now that I might have forgotten some people that they didn't get their book. But
if they didn't get their book,
call back.
The callback, or for anyone else listening, by the way, if you become a patron at TrentHornPodcast.com in the month of May, so wait a few days, and in the month of May, if you become a patron at $10 a month or higher, or $100, an annual gift to support what we're doing at Council of Trent, you will get a free copy of Confusion in the Kingdom. That's only for people who subscribe in the month of May. It'll help us to build our new studio, to reach a lot more people. We're getting tens of thousands of views at Council of Trent. So if you want a free copy of your own and also help us at Council of Trent, in the month of May, become a supporter at $10 a month or higher at TrentHornPodcast.com.
Trent, thank you very much. As always, enjoyed the hour with you.
It's you too.
And congratulations on the new book. People can get it 25% off right now. If you just want to, if you just can't wait, head over to shop.catholic.com. Use the promo code SANITY and get Confusion in the Kingdom: How Progressive Catholicism is Bringing Harm and Scandal to the Church. Do check out Council of Trent, TrentHornPodcast.com. Visit the YouTube website, because it's quite a thing that Trent's doing over there, and you won't be sorry you checked it out. All right, we'll be right back. Dr. Jared Stout is going to try to help us get a little more merry in our lives right after this. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Oh, we generally try to finish the work week on a positive note with something good to talk about, and we've got a wonderful topic and a wonderful guest this hour. As I was saying at the beginning of the program, we do a lot of defending of Mary around here, but what we'd like to do this hour is help you grow, develop, strengthen, improve, or maybe start your relationship with Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was given to you as a mother. She was given to all of us as a mother. And wherever you are, whoever you are, whether you're Catholic or not Catholic, she wants to mother you. And if you'd like to get in on the conversation, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Jared Stout. He is the director of content with Exodus 90, and you probably know about Exodus 90. They do wonderful work helping men to grow and become more fully men by becoming closer to the person of Jesus Christ, the model for all of us. Dr. Jared Stout, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me. And, you know, we've been known by Exodus 90, but, you know, these days we are trying to present ourselves as Exodus. Because the 90 days or 90 days up to Easter of, you know, prayer and fasting, cold showers, of course, which is what we're known for. But we offer content for men all year round. And so we are gearing up for a Marian consecration that starts on Sunday, the feast day of St. Louis de Montfort, and ends on the Feast of the Visitation, May 31st. So that's just one example that we are Exodus all year round now.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. And but okay, so Marian consecration. Here is something that sometimes our apologists will have to defend. For many Christians, particularly Protestant Christians, this does not compute. But rather than defend it, I would ask you, could you describe it to us and maybe invite, give the kind of pitch for why someone might participate in a Marian consecration?
So when you consecrate something, you set it apart and dedicate it particularly to God. And every Christian is consecrated by virtue of our baptism. And St. Louis de Montfort presented this consecration to Jesus through Mary as a strengthening of our baptismal vows. And so it's not like in competition to that. It's not like we're saying baptism is not good enough. But I would really say that it is coming before Mary. It's almost even like in a feudal way, right? You know, it's like, I would like to be your knight. I would like to be your servant and to do what I do with you and for your honor. And really, I need help. And Louis de Montfort even called it a kind of servitude. You know, it's translated in English as slavery. And we're like, that's horrible. Like, I don't want to be a slave to anybody. But, you know, in the ancient world, even if you look in the Bible, slavery was when you actually couldn't pay your debts and you weren't able to survive on the land. And so you would voluntarily, sometimes involuntary, depending on the circumstances, but put yourself in servitude to someone else who could care for you, provide for you, and you would work in exchange for that. And so I think that's part of the idea here. It's like, Mary, I'm having a hard time living out the vows of my baptism. Mm-hmm. And I want to be a saint. And so I am coming and putting myself in this kind of voluntary servitude, understood in a kind of loving, familial kind of way, because I can't cut it. And so I need you to help me to live this out, to do all that I do for Jesus. And you are the one who's closest to him. If you become my mother in a special way, then I know that you're going to be able to help me to really live the Christian life.
888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Already folks on the line, and I am going to let callers get in here momentarily to talk with Dr. Stout from Exodus. I'm going to say that wrong, and you can correct me anytime I get it wrong, because once I get it in my head, it is hard to get it out. But from Exodus and Marian consecration coming up. Would you give us the dates again for this, Mary?
So it's this coming Sunday, April 28th. And the consecration day is the Feast of the Visitation on May 31st.
And just in general, apart from consecration, I mean, there is a thing in the Catholic Church that's very, very clear, this promotion of a relationship with Mary, this praying of the Rosary, the Memorare, the Angelus. I think we still pray the Angelus. I know some people still pray the Angelus. I hope we still pray the Angelus. But what is the point of all this relationship with Mary? It's not really like you could probably say to somebody, do I have to have all this devotion to Mary? You could technically probably, but you're not going to be very Catholic without it. I mean, it's going to be hard to be very Catholic without it.
Well, I think we could say it would be hard to be Christian without it. And this is why. To be a Christian is to become Christ. Paul says in Galatians, it is now no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And so we are one flesh with Christ in the Eucharist. We have his spirit. He's breathed his own inner life into us. Paul says we have the mind of Christ. He has given us his Father. We say our Father because his Father is now our Father. And guess what? That means his mother is also our mother. And so to be Christian, that is to be Christ in the world, we have everything that he had. And he wants us to have a relationship with his mother. And that's scriptural. You know, I think John did not use his name in his gospel for a reason, because he presents himself as the beloved disciple so that we can put ourselves into his shoes, or his sandals, maybe we should say. And at the foot of the cross, Jesus says to the beloved disciple, not to John, but to the disciple, behold your mother. And then he took her into his home. And there it is, right? And so the disciple has this special relationship with her. And I think even more than that, the church has always connected Mary's role, not only as mother, but as the queen mother who plays an essential role in the kingdom of her son. She is the one who crushes the head of the serpent. And so we have, this struggle that we see all the way back at the very beginning in Genesis 3, but then there it is again in Revelation 12, that the dragon actually confronts the woman who is giving birth, right, to the son. And so it's, traditionally seen as an image of Our Lady and the church at once. And that is the key struggle, this enmity between the children of the woman and the dragon and those that he pulls down from the sky with him. And there it is, right? So if we are the disciple, we become children of Mary with Jesus. And we become part of the struggle then against the dragon and his children. And I think that's really part of this understanding of the consecration, that we are putting ourselves on the right side of this struggle and saying to Our Lady, we want to be part of this fight with you under your protection, so that we can really live with your son.
Wow. Relationship with Mary is our topic. Whether you're Catholic or not, you are welcome to call and ask your questions about relationship with Mary. Dr. Jared Stout is our guest, Director of Content with Exodus. They've got a Marian consecration coming up that you can find out about. If you want to call here and talk with Dr. Stout, 888-318-7884. If you want to participate in the Marian consecration, where do people go, Dr. Stout?
Exodus90.com.
Oh, Exodus90.com. Mm-hmm. I
It's
see.
still there. The 90 hasn't gone away, but we are.
When I say it, it's a problem. Okay, we'll take a quick break.
Exodus 365, right? No.
Exactly. All right, we're going to take a very quick break because we do have callers on the line. There are a couple lines open if you'd like to get in. We'd love to hear from anybody who has questions, practical or otherwise, about developing a relationship with Mary, the mother that Jesus himself gave us. 888-318-7884.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at Magnificat.com.
EWTN Heavenly Hints.
What's in your wallet? Do you carry and collect holy cards of your favorite saints and favorite prayers as reminders of your faith? Why not share some with first responders or military personnel as you go throughout your day? Without being intrusive, look your recipient in the eye and ask, "May I give you this with my prayers?" A simple holy card can often succinctly say what we feel and resonates longer than our spoken words.
A heavenly hint from EWTN.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Jared Stout is our guest. We're talking about building a relationship with Mary as he, as director of content with Exodus, prepares for this Sunday's beginning of a process of Marian consecration that they'll do with people all over the world. I'm sure you have people who log in all over the world. Isn't that right?
Yeah, actually, Eastern Europe is probably our second biggest region after the United States. And so, yeah, we do have people in Australia and Asia, all across the world. And I think that's part of the power of this Marian consecration because, of course, people do it individually or in small groups, but we're going to have thousands of men doing this from, countries all around the world. And we're really trying to say, okay, we're going to stem the tide here. We're not doing well in the church and in society. And so we as men are saying, we're turning to Our Lady together. And we are going to be men for Jesus. We are really going to make a difference here. So I think that's really the key is, as you're saying, that this is a worldwide consecration.
888-318-7884, the number. All right, I've been putting it off long enough because I've been enjoying my conversation with Dr. Stout, but we'll let callers have their say now. Jeremy is in Virginia watching on YouTube. Jeremy, thank you for your patience. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Jared Stout.
Great. Well, this might only be tangentially related to Mary, but I saw a meme online that said a woman was praying to a figurine of St. Anthony for years, only to find out that it was actually an action figure. And it got me thinking, does it really matter what the statue is? Like if I had a hammer that reminded me of St. Joseph, couldn't I use that in the same way?
Wait, what possible action figure was confused? Is it like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something? And she thought, was he holding a baby?
I can't vouch for the accuracy of the meme, but it claimed that it was Elrond from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. Well, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. I mean, if it was Spider-Man, that woman has bigger problems than who statues she's praying to. But all right, Dr. Stout, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you had a hammer, that would actually be a symbol, right? So that wouldn't be an image like of St. Joseph. It would be a symbol that reminds you of St. Joseph. So I teach art history, so this gives me a chance to roll the sleeves up and talk about art. All right, great. So I would say, yeah, it does matter to a certain degree because, let's say that there was, an image that portrayed Our Lady or one of the saints like in a bad light, right? So that would be unfit. So I think we want images that are dignified, that seem holy, right? Because there are images of Our Lady that seem really mundane. Right. But we want to say that the image is a kind of window as an icon. Right. And an icon is a window into a holy space. And it's meant to help us to meditate. And that's how I would really judge an image. Does this help me to focus my attention on the presence of our Lord, of Our Lady, of the saints, and to have holy thoughts and to be inspired? And so in that sense, it is practical, and people might be inspired by some images and not another. But when it does come to Our Lady, I would recommend a portrait taken from the tilma. Because I love praying to the image of the shroud when we're talking about the face of Jesus, because I think the evidence is absolutely overwhelming for the authenticity of the shroud. You should look up books on that topic. But when it comes to the face of Our Lady, even though there's traditions of St. Luke painting an icon of her. There's so many different icons that claim that heritage, and none of them are that old. But Our Lady gave us an image of herself. And so I love praying before the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
So I just want to go back to Jeremy. Just does that make sense to you? Does that get at what you wanted to get at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's accurate that you might say that it was a symbol and not a figurine of Saint Anthony or whoever it might be.
Right.
But I'm 100% behind you on the Shroud of Turin, though.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I am I come down very much in favor of the Shroud of Turin being authentic, except one test that was done for it, and I say to myself, well, we got to take in the evidence, and then I never know what to do with the evidence. But or did you want to say something about that? You're gonna convince me now about the Shroud? Okay. Yeah. Now we've this hour is about the Shroud of Turin now. All right, go ahead, Dr.
We're going to do a Marian consecration while we meditate on the Shroud of Turin.
Okay.
But there was a group of researchers, they call them the STURP group, in the late 70s, and they actually made a recommendation to the group from Oxford. There was a number of labs, one of them was Oxford, but that when they did the radiocarbon dating, and they said, do not take the samples from this section. And guess what? They took the samples from that section that they had advised not using because it was compromised. So I think there are many reasons for putting the radiocarbon dating to the side. And some of the other details are just overwhelming when you look at like pollen samples from the different places where the shroud went, even things that only bloom like in the spring in Jerusalem and nowhere else, and so there's so many things like that, and the weave and the way that the image, was impressed, and we could go on and on and on. But so, yes, I would not be daunted by the radiocarbon dating.
All right. I've been converted. I was a complete conversion. It was instantaneous. Jeremy, thanks very much for the call. We're talking with Dr. Jared Stout. We're talking about building a relationship with Mary this hour. If you would like to deepen or maybe start your relationship with Mary, give us a call. Or maybe just have questions about how and why as far as relationship with Mary. 888-318-7884. Theodore is in Idaho, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Welcome, Theodore. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stout.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my call. I got a question regarding Marian consecration in general. My family has been consecrated to Mary since the beginning, and both my children. And then we have all the relatives who come forward and say, hey, you should consecrate to St. Joseph and all these other things while you're at it. Just go do that. It's like something feels off about the term consecrating me to multiple things other than one thing. If it's sure it's not in competition. But if I want to focus my life on something, is it wrong for me to, say, consecrate myself to 3 different saints? Does that sound off?
This is how I would put that in perspective, that we're always consecrating ourselves to Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus takes us to the Father. That's always the goal. There's one goal. It's the bosom of the Father, and Jesus is the only way to the Father. But Jesus is very clear that we come to him, that we come to the Father in communion with others. I mean, he called 12 apostles to reconstitute the nation of Israel. We are not individuals, and so we actually become part of Jesus' family. He gives us his mother, and I think we can say that he gives us his adoptive father, Joseph, as well, because if we are so united with Jesus, then his mother becomes our mother, his heavenly father is our heavenly father, and his earthly father is our earthly father. So we consecrate ourselves to Jesus through Mary. St. Joseph is the patron of the Universal Church. And so if we do a consecration to Joseph, once again, I think we should always in our minds understand that to mean I am asking for Joseph's particular help in living the Christian life, and that this is really a strengthening the dedication of my life to Christ. And so you can consecrate your life with the help of multiple saints. And so I have a particular devotion also to Saint Benedict as a Benedictine oblate. And I'm also part of the Angelic Warfare Confraternity under the patronage of St. Thomas Aquinas. And so every single day, I am approaching my relationship with the Lord with the help of his mother, with his earthly father, with St. Benedict and St. Thomas Aquinas. And those are like my guys. And I literally imagine them even standing behind me with their hand on my shoulder in prayer. And I really rely on them. And I think we should all have a kind of a group of special patrons, with Our Lady chief among them, because she is the Queen Mother, and they are there for us on a day-to-day basis.
What do you think, Theodore?
Yep, that makes sense. I appreciate the help.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the call. The number here is 888-318-7884. Dr. Jared Stout is our guest. We're talking about relationship with Mary. Something I'm delighted that we get to talk with on this Friday afternoon here in San Diego. I really do have the feeling that we can, as Catholics, get defensive about Mary because we're challenged on Mary a lot. But our primary disposition towards Mary should be one of childlike love for our mother. And it's nice to get to spend some time talking about that and promoting that. Andrew's in Oregon watching on YouTube. Andrew, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stout.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So my family and I are currently Anglicans, and we're discerning Catholicism. And I, in particular, have been praying the rosary regularly. And so I have a couple questions about that. I guess the first is kind of a practical one in terms of, there's a lot of repetition, which I've heard sort of the arguments for why that's okay. I guess my question, though, is in a relationship, what are we hoping we're achieving by requesting that prayer multiple times of Mary? And then secondly, at the end, when we address Mary in I think it's called the Salve Regina, we refer to her as Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. And just, coming from a Protestant background, I think those referring to Mary in that way can feel very, I'm on board until I refer to you as my life kind of thing.
Well, there's someone else who described himself as our life. So that seems reasonable to have that problem. Dr. Stout, can you help Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many great things that you've asked here, so hopefully I can get through the main points. But, we refer to the rosary as Our Lady's Psalter. And it's really been presented to us as a way of fulfilling our daily, I would say, portion of prayer. I almost said obligation. I don't think that's the right way of looking at it. So many of the saints have said that, if we don't pray, we won't be saved. And then when they give us recommendations of how often to pray, they say, you need to meditate, engage in mental prayer for at least 15 minutes a day. And so Our Lady, in so many of the apparitions where she's appeared, has said, pray the rosary daily. And I think that's really our mother saying, now make sure to say your daily prayers. And during your daily prayers, I'm going to come and hold your hand, right? Let's do this together. I know you're having a hard time getting in your 15 minutes a day. So let's do this together. And I tell people that the rosary is really meant to be relational. I know it can become rote, and we have to really, I think, try to work on really being in the Lord's presence during it. But we say, Our Father. We say, Hail Mary. Hail, in a way, it's a greeting. It's like, hello, Mary. We say, glory be to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We say, oh my Jesus. Right? These are all relational prayers. And in our topic for this hour is relating to Mary. Well, how do you relate to someone? You talk with them. And so 53 times during the rosary, we say, greetings, Mary. Hello, Mary. And I think we have to look at that as a kind of open door. Like we're opening the door of our home to try to be with our Lord and his mother. And when we're looking at the prayer, the Hail Holy Queen prayer, I think it's very important to understand that properly, because if there's ever any competition with Jesus, there's a problem, right? But that's one of the beautiful things about his mother, is that everything he has in his humanity, he received from her. When you receive the Eucharist and you consume the flesh of Christ, that flesh comes from her. The very incarnation itself comes from her fiat. And, there's the great traditional prayer, the Ave Maria Stella, where it says that her Ave undid what Eva did, which those are just reverse. Eve and Ave, they're spelled different directions in the Latin. And so Eve brought death through her sin, and Mary brought life through her fiat. What life did she bring? The life of Jesus, right? There's no competition. everything that, like I said, Jesus has in his humanity comes through her. Once again, as if through an open door. And so St. Louis de Montfort said that Jesus came into the world through his mother, and he continues to will to come into the world through her again. Behold your mother. He wants her to be our mother. And what do you receive from your mother? Life. What life do you receive from your heavenly mother? The life of her son, right? No competition.
Andrew, I'm going to come back to you. Helpful? Do you have follow-up questions?
Yeah, I think that is helpful, in particular thinking about your example, or I guess it wasn't an example, but just the reality of the incarnation is dependent on Mary's, yes. Thinking about that in the sense of like, yeah, like in some ways you can talk about her as being our life, because without the incarnation, we are still dead in our sins, right? So that's really helpful to think of her as that focal point, I think.
And it's not just once and done. She continues to have that role of bringing her son to us.
Andrew, I'd like to give you a couple books. We've got a little booklet called 20 Answers the Rosary. And if you'd like it, I'll send you Trent Horn's book, Why We're Catholic. And if there's anything else we can do for you, please let us know. Praise God that you and your family are discerning coming into the Catholic Church. Right back with more with Dr. Jared Stout on Catholic Answers Live.
When it comes to Catholic teachings about Mary, there's one question we hear more than any other. Where is that in the Bible? The answer? Everywhere. In Bible Mary, the Mother of Jesus and the Word of God, Father John Weiss opens Scripture to reveal a Mary who has been hiding in plain sight. Order your copy of Bible Mary today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As we read the Gospels, every Christian faces the question again and again, what does Jesus mean? Getting the answer right is critical to both growth in holiness and fruitful evangelization. Want to know Jesus better so you can introduce him to your friends? Then it's time to get serious about understanding his words. Why not join Catholic Answers for our 10th annual Apologetics Conference? Learn from me the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. September 26th through 29th, right here in sunny San Diego. Learn from our guests, Dr. Scott Hahn and Kimberly Hahn, Dr. Ray Guarendi, Father Sebastian Walsh, Billy Junker, Father Paul Check, and, of course, all of your favorite Catholic Answers apologists. It'll be 4 days of fun, faith, fellowship, and a live radio show. Seats are still available, but going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 1-888-291-8000 today.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Join me for Beacon of Truth.
On the next Beacon of Truth, the vine and the branches, and looking at Soulful Psalm 139.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live with Cy Kellett.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Is developing, building, working on, or initiating your relationship with Mary, the Mother of Jesus, something that you would like some help with? This is the perfect hour for you to call and ask your questions about relationship with Mary. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. We're going to go back to the phones. Before we do, Catholic Answers, taking a little cruise. We're going to start on June 29th in Montreal. We're going to end, on July 6th in Boston, Massachusetts. About 150 people coming so far, and we'd love it if you'd come. We'll have Mass each day. We'll have lots of wonderful talks and conversations and great Catholic fellowship as we go to places like visiting St. Anne de Beaupré or the Oratory of St. Joseph and all that. Find out more, if you'd like more information, at CatholicAnswersCruise.com. CatholicAnswersCruise.com. Our guest here is Dr. Jared Stout. He is the director of content at Exodus, which you can find at Exodus90.com. And they've got a consecration for men to undertake to marry, and it'll start this Sunday. Maybe that's something that you'd want to do. Why would anyone want to do that, Dr. Stout?
Well, I first consecrated my life to Jesus through Mary in 1996, and I'm really looking forward to doing it again. It's been a real blessing to me, just being able to turn to Mary as my mother through all difficulties, asking for her help, asking for her guidance, and I do feel her presence close to me, especially in difficult moments. So if you have not done it and you've been interested in doing it, this is a great opportunity. But if you've done it before, like me, it's a great renewal opportunity as well. We are using Father Boniface Hicks's book, The Fruit of Her Womb, 33-day preparation for total consecration to Jesus. And so he's building on St. Louis de Montfort, but he's giving us beautiful reflections that he's written. He's drawing from other authors like Pope Benedict. There's beautiful art and prayers each day. So it's about a 10-minute commitment each day for the 33-day preparation period. But you can access his book directly through our app. Right? So you don't have to go out and buy Father Boniface's book. We have a license to use it. And it's going to, I think, really be a great experience, even better than using just the St. Louis de Montfort method on its own.
And if you'd like more information, just call and join us. We've got quite a few lines open now. 4 lines are open at the moment. 888-318-7884. Connor's in Atlanta, Georgia, watching on YouTube. Connor, thank you for your patience. I know you waited a little while. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stout.
No, it's all good. Thank you for having me on here. So, I just had a question that I think is a little more, I guess maybe I'm making this one up, but just in case, I think that one of the objections I can anticipate non-Catholics, I guess, kind of having towards, a relationship with Mary as our Blessed Mother is that they might think that we're almost kind of pitting our biological or adoptive mother against, Mary as a spiritual mother, as if we're trying to replace her with Mary. And maybe I'm just making that up, but as far as something people wouldn't actually say, but in case that's a real objection people have, how would you go about, I guess, kind of clarifying that, they're not competing at all, kind of like, how we're not putting Mary against Jesus when we consecrate ourselves to her?
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that this is really a great benefit. Now, I can understand some mothers being, what do you mean you have another mother? Aren't I your mother? Like, I get where you're coming from with that for sure. But both with our father and with our mother on earth, right? There's limitations. They have given us our life. They've cared for us. There's always wounds to overcome as well. But just as they have given us our biological life and kind of shaped us, morally in certain ways, we are being reborn into everlasting life, right? And that began with baptism. And we really want the seed of our baptism to grow into a full tree. That's what the consecration is about. And what does Jesus say? Call no man father, for you have one Father. And of course, we still, call our dads father, and there's no real competition there. But at the end of the day, even the gift of fatherhood that we have received from our earthly fathers is a participation in the life of our Heavenly Father, the one who is the ultimate source and origin of our life. And in terms of our spiritual life, before the break, we were talking about Mary being the one who has given us the gift of her Son. And that's always her focus. Do whatever he tells you. Mary is never saying, hey, come over here. Come listen to me over here. I'll tell you some other things that Jesus didn't say. No, she's always do whatever he tells you. And so she is a mother in the sense of really helping this rebirth in the spirit to come to its full fruition in this life. And so we need a mother on that level, a perfect mother. We love our mothers, but I mean, Mary is a mother in a higher way, in a spiritual way, and she is helping us to be conformed to her son.
Connor, thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it. The number is 888-318-7884. We're talking about relationship with Mary today with Dr. Jared Stout on Catholic Answers Live. And now we go to Cincinnati. Bob's in Cincinnati listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Bob, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stout.
Thank you for taking the call. I caught your remarks a little earlier about Galileo and the discovery that the sun does not revolve around the earth and that the Bible is not meant to be a scientific book. Wouldn't the same thing apply to Mary in saying that she was a perpetual virgin in light of the fact that if Jesus was fully a man, he had to have Y chromosomes, and that only comes from a man? Why are we not taking perpetual virginity idea as a legend?
Yeah, so I would say when we say the Bible is not scientific, what we mean is that the claims of the Bible are not presented to us in scientific fashion. If it were, it would say, I want to teach you about the way that earthly realities work, or I want to teach you about the way in which my son will be conceived in the womb, right? And these are things that you can learn from experience, because that's what science is. Things that are replicable, things that can be understood by observation. And so the position of the earth and the sun is actually something that can be verified through observation. In the ancient world, they got their observations wrong, but through observation, we were able to overcome that. The virgin birth, however, is not something that can be scientifically verified. Now, I think what you're saying rightly is that if it is real, then there is a reality that's not simply legendary. I mean, Jesus did have chromosomes. What were they? Well, the Bible is actually not trying to teach us that. And so it is a great question to kind of ponder, but God is revealing to us in the Bible what we need to know for our salvation. And there are earthly realities that are discussed which are necessary for our salvation, including the incarnation itself. But God does not want us to aim at some kind of scientific validation of the incarnation and the virgin birth. Rather, they are presented to us in faith. And faith is a way of knowing. The Catholic tradition is very clear about that. And some people say, oh, well, that's a cop-out because only science is real knowledge. However, 99% of what we know, we have accepted on faith. When you opened up your science textbook in school, if you accepted the validity of your science textbook, you did so in faith because you trust the publisher, you trust the credentials of the author, you trust your school teacher and your school to be presenting you accurate information. That was all taken on faith. That is the primary way that human beings know anything. You look something up on the internet, you're taking that on faith, actually. Everything that is taught to you by your family and your friends, you accept on faith. So that's the way that the Bible presents things to us as facts to be accepted and trust, right? That we trust the messengers who speak on behalf of God. We recognize that they do speak on behalf of God if we accept that message in faith.
Bob, that brings us right to the break. So I will say thank you very much for the call. The number here is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Jared Stout. He's the Director of Content with Exodus. They are embarking on Sunday on a worldwide Marian consecration for men, and you can participate. Just go to exodus90.com and find out how. If you've got questions about building your relationship with Mary, whether you've got one or you don't got one. If you've got questions about getting that relationship, just give us a call, 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Hosting Women Made New has helped me deepen my own faith, and I look forward to every weekend having those in-depth discussions with my guests. It's been such a blessing being a part of the EWTN family and carry on the mission that Mother Angelica started.
Women Made New, Saturday noon Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I always enjoy the time with Dr. Jared Stout whenever we get to have him on. You formerly taught at the Augustine Institute. Now you're with Exodus. We've had many wonderful conversations, but I am particularly happy with today's opportunity to talk about Mary, because I hadn't thought about this, that we're always defending her and we're rarely talking about building up that relationship with her. I mentioned the Angelus, and I really don't know how many people pray the Angelus anymore. But this is, to me, this is like the example of Marian prayer, of how it's meant to get us to Jesus through Mary. I wish more people. Maybe you could kind of talk up the Angelus to the Exodus guys a little bit, because it's a terrible thing to lose if we're losing it.
Well, Mary's motherhood is ordered towards being disciples of Jesus Christ. That's clear. And what do we see Luke say about Mary? She pondered these things in her heart. And that's what we're supposed to be doing during the Rosary, meditating on the mysteries, as challenging as that is. I put up pictures for my kids to look at. It keeps us on track. The Angelus is the same, right? How do you ponder these things in your heart? Luke says that particularly about the mystery of the incarnation itself, right? When we look at what happened at the Annunciation, at the Visitation, at the Presentation, these are all the mysteries related to the incarnation of her Son. She kept these things. She pondered them. Well, if you're going to do the same thing, then you need to kind of fit that into your schedule. So how do you do that? You start the day, you come back at midday, and then at the end of the day, you're thinking about the incarnation. That is really the goal of the Angelus. And, when you live in a Catholic place, you start ringing those bells, and it's a beautiful thing. So 6, 12, and 6 is when we stop, you say the Angelus. I have to say that, unfortunately, it's a rare day when I hit all three of those times. The morning one is the hardest for me. But I've set alarms at these times and just really trying to get into that rhythm so that I can be like Mary, pondering the incarnation with her.
It's funny that you say that about the ringing of the bells, because I forgot that there's a famous painting, and now I'm forgetting the name of the painter who painted the French. Millet.
Millet.
Yeah. Millet. Yeah, he painted the couple out in the field, and today I will admit to a little bit of envy of Muslim society because of the call to prayer. I don't want the call to prayer, but I do kind of like the idea of the bells to remind you to pray. In medieval towns, you ring the church bells at 6 in the morning, at noon, and at 6 in the evening to remind people to pray. And that's what Millet's painting is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And already in the Didache, our earliest catechetical document from the first century, it says that Christians prayed the Our Father 3 times a day. And so this is, as ancient as it gets, to stop and pray 3 times a day. And, Muhammad was not very original. And so praying 5 times a day was an imitation of what he saw Christians doing. Just like Ramadan is an imitation of what Lent was like in the ancient world, because Christians didn't eat during the day during Lent, and they had one simple meal in the evening after the sunset. So what you admire about the Muslims was actually what Muhammad admired about the Christians in the ancient world. So we really just need to return to our own heritage of having these times, and I think those 3, times to stop, 6, noon, and 6 are just a great way of coming back to punctuating the day with prayer.
888-318-7884 is our number. We're talking about having a relationship with Mary, and if you've got questions in that regard, if you're not a Catholic and you've got, because I've known many non-Catholics who have actually kind of longed for that relationship, and they know the person to ask is a Catholic. If you are among those, you're welcome to call. Anybody who wants to develop a relationship with Mary can give us a call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Where I live here in Southern California, Our Lady of Guadalupe is big. You see her all over the place. Maybe that's true everywhere now in the U.S. I don't know. But it's always been the case here because, you probably know this little fact of history, but we used to be Mexico. Many people don't know that about California, but we weren't always.
Even in the Carolinas where I live now, there were Spanish missions up the coast.
Oh, were
all
there
the
really?
way up to Virginia.
Oh,
I most of the
that.
country was Mexico in some fashion at one point or another. Spain, that is, New Spain, we should say. Yeah.
Edgar just pumped his fist at that. Are you? All right, Edgar, fine. This is something I do think that somewhat baffles non-Catholics or people who are new to the Catholic Church. The idea of Mary under these various titles, like what is, Our Lady of Sorrows, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Good Hope. What are we Catholics doing with that? And does that really help with the relationship with Mary?
I think it does. I was recently visiting the oldest Marian shrine in the country at Our Lady of the Milk, La Leche, down at the Nombre de Dios mission in St. Augustine, Florida. And that's a great title for what we're talking about, having this relationship of the spiritual motherhood, spiritual nourishment. Once again, that's ordered always towards her son. Everything that Mary does is towards her son. But they focus on these different aspects. And like Our Lady of Sorrows, for instance, when you look at Luke's gospel in the presentation, when Simeon says that a sword of sorrow will pierce her heart so that the hearts of many will be revealed. So when we pray to Our Lady of Sorrows, we pray that what's hidden within us will be made known, will be made manifest, so that we can understand our struggles, our sorrows more deeply and address them with her. Our Lady of Guadalupe, when you look at things like that, now Guadalupe was actually the monastery in Spain where Columbus's trip was dedicated to Our Lady. And so that's actually very fundamental, the fact that Mary's apparition in Mexico was linked back up with that monastery in Spain. And so it's a bond between continents, that the Catholic faith has really become a bridge between the old and the new world through Our Lady's help. Because we know the conquistadors were messing everything up in horrible ways. And so Our Lady intervened and said, I am, Our Lady of Guadalupe. I am here to kind of set things right and to try to bring peace where there was disorder. And so Our Lady is not only drawing us into the mysteries of her life through these different titles, but she's also, I think, helping us to see the different places where we live, whether it's Fatima, and there's a connection to Islamic
Muhammad,
history there, of course, but locations. And so you see this all the time, Our Lady of the Lake, Our Lady of the Mountains, Our Lady of the Pines, all these things. Well, what are we trying to do there? We're trying to, just like in the consecration that we're undertaking, we're offering these things to Jesus through the intercession of his mother so that they would become holy.
I have heard some people kind of emphasize the fact that Jesus has a father and a mother, and if we lose the mother side, if we downgrade Mary, we downgrade the humanity of Christ. We're missing out on part of his humanity, and I do kind of feel like there's a visceral way of experiencing that in a lot of places. Mary is connected to physical things. She's like, the earthy side of Catholicism is very Marian.
And I think it's because the Catholic faith is deeply sacramental. And that is based on the incarnation. And the incarnation happened through Our Lady. And so you're right. All these things are linked. You get rid of Our Lady, you start losing sight of the humanity of Christ. You lose the sacraments, the embodied family of the church, that we are the people of God who are the body of Christ instantiated in the world right now. And all of these things hang together. And when we lose sight of Our Lady, we also lose sight of the holiness that we are called to, that we are called to be saints, because then all of the saints kind of fall with her. Because the church ultimately is a family. We are entering into to Jesus' home in Nazareth with him. You know, when we consecrate our lives to Jesus through Mary, it's like we're entering into that home. And we say, you know, I am one with Jesus. I want to be here sitting with Our Lady, sitting with St. Joseph. I want to dedicate my daily work, my relationships, that I want all of this to be holy, not only an imitation of the Holy Family, because imitation is not a strong enough word, but participating in the life of the Holy Family, that our life can actually be joined to the life of the Holy Family. And I think that's the key to the rosary. Why is the rosary so important? Like Father Patrick Peyton, the family that prays together stays together. And he was talking about the rosary in particular, because it is in that prayer, as we're talking to our Lord, Our Lady, to the Holy Trinity, that we are linking our lives up to theirs. And this is the time in which our home can become a little Nazareth.
What an extraordinary vision. And you know, we do see in the modern world Joseph getting more attention than he used to get too. I mean, it's certainly in the last 400 or 500 years that Joseph has taken a prominent role. Maybe that's connected. Maybe it's connected to the kind of, I don't want to use a fancy word, but I always loved the word atomization. From the day I learned what atomization is, I thought, well, that does really actually describe the modern situation. We're all like little atoms. None of us are connected to each other.
And that is precisely the time that we need our spiritual family to reemerge, right? In this time of secularism, we have Our Lady intervening, right? You think of, people thought that the Catholic Church would just be obliterated in Europe, or, you know, through the French Revolution. And then you look at all of these interventions in the 19th century, Lourdes, La Salette, and other places. I mean, even in the United States, right, to Adele Breeze in Wisconsin, right? We had a 19th century apparition here. So it seems that even though there's been apparitions throughout all of church history, even in the early church, there is something about the last couple of hundred years where Our Lady is especially reaching out to us and closing us with the mantle of her protection, kind of drawing us in. And I think that is absolutely tied to what you're saying about the role of St. Joseph. Our work has become secularized, so we need him as the model worker. We are losing touch with our fathers and with family life. And this is why Joseph is becoming so prominent. And we had that caller earlier asking, is consecration to St. Joseph in opposition to consecration to Our Lady? And I would say, do it together. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, to Jesus through Mary and Joseph. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, give us, if you would, again, because we're talking about Mary. We're talking about relationship with Mary. We're talking about building relationship with Mary. In the coming days, you're going to undertake an effort at Exodus, which people can find at Exodus 90, to draw thousands and thousands and thousands of men into closer relationship with the mother given to them by Jesus, Mary. Tell us about how people, again, if you would, before you go, about how people can participate.
Yes. So if you go to exodus90.com, you will see, prominently displayed there just like how to join up in the consecration. Right through our app, we are offering Father Boniface Hicks' book, The Fruit of Her Womb, 33-day preparation for total consecration to Jesus. So that will have daily meditations and prayers directly in the app. And then on May 31st, we will be making this consecration together, thousands of men throughout the world, and it's going to be very powerful. And we're going to see an impact not only in our lives, but in our families, in the church, and in society, because this is going to have a ripple. We can count on that.
Right. It will have a ripple. Little acts that Mary does seem to have huge implications for the rest of us. Little things like saying yes or saying, oh, do whatever he tells you. These things have eternal, apparently, consequences. Dr. Jared Stout, you're always a wonderful guest. I'm so glad you're associated with Exodus. I think it'll be just great for them and bring even greater prosperity to their efforts to bring people to Christ. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Dr. Jared Stout, he's the director of content at Exodus. You can find them at exodus90.com. It was an interesting week to work at Catholic Answers this week. I'm not going to say why. If you don't know why, then you could look it up. Look it up on the internet. But pray for us. I'll tell you what, we'll pray for you as well. We need to pray for one another. And that'll do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.